Coming into the home stretch here, boys and girls. Third grammar lesson in chapter 14. We're going to be talking about adverbial clauses. Now, different books, different texts, different teachers are going to call these clauses by different names. We saw adjective clauses before, which describe a clause that described a noun. These are adverbial clauses, and they deal with aspects of time. I divide these two clauses because we're going to be talking about two sets of prepositions or clauses that we have that are followed by subjunctive. Some of these clauses are always followed by subjunctive, and then other words are sometimes followed by the subjunctive. And the reason that I have times in the capital is because they deal with time aspects of time. Let's look at these. The following adverbial conjunctions always require the subjunctive. A fin de que, so that. Antes de que, before. A menos que, unless. Con tal de que, provided that. En caso de que, in case of. Para que, so that. Sin que, without. Since these phrases indicate that one action is contingent upon another action, the outcome is unknown. Mi familia emigró de su país para que tuviéramos una vida mejor. My family immigrated from their country so that we would have a better life. Notice that para que is used, and no matter what happens, whatever the main tense of the verb is, in this case, mi familia emigró, it's indicative, past tense. So past subjunctive is going to be used, which is why tuviéramos follows para que. These phrases can be used with the infinitive if there is no change in subject, and we've seen that before. The que will be dropped in this case. Esta organización sirve para proteger los derechos humanos. This organization serves to protect human rights. Notice that the organization serves, no change of subject, the organization protects. So since there's no change of subject, there's no division in the clause, and we just use the preposition para without que. Nos mudamos a fin de tener una casa más grande. We moved in order to have a bigger house. Notice the subject is the same. We. We moved. We have a bigger house. So we don't use a fin de que because there's no transition from one subject to another. The following phrases sometimes take the subjunctive, namely when referring to actions that have not yet occurred. If they occur all the time, then the indicative is used. But let's look at these phrases first. Cuando, when. Después de que, after. En cuanto, as soon as. Hasta que, until. Tan pronto como, as soon as. In each one of these cases, how are they different from the phrases or clauses before? They deal with aspects of time. When, after, as soon as, and until. And the last one, as soon as. So dealing with aspects of time, después de que and hasta que take the infinitive if there is no change of subject and the que is omitted, just like we saw in the prior slides. If there is only one subject, you don't need to use que. But let's look more closely at this aspect of time. If it's something that always happens, then it's going to be in the indicative. Siempre voto cuando hay una elección. I always vote when there is an election. Notice that it's not cuando haya. I is in the indicative. It's something that normally and usually happens. Second example. Hay que seguir la ley estadounidense hasta llegar a la frontera mexicana. You have to follow the law in the United States until arriving at the Mexican border. This is just an example that you do not need to have hasta que because there is no change of subject. But when things you're talking about always happen, then you don't have to use the subjunctive. You use the indicative. However, if you're talking about something that's going to be happening in the future, and it's a one-time event, then you're going to be using subjunctive because it's in the future. No sé si voy a votar cuando haya elecciones. I don't know if I'm going to vote when there are elections, meaning it's looking towards the future. There's a clue here, but that's not always the case. Voy a votar is pointing to some time in the future, which is not always the case with sentence structure, but the action is going to happen at one point in the future. Let me give you an example, and you tell me if you would use indicative or subjunctive. Next summer, when I go to Europe, is that something that always happens, or is it something that's going to happen in the future? Next summer, when I go to Europe, it's talking about something in the future, isn't it? So you would say, el verano próximo, cuando yo vaya a Europa. You would use a subjunctive. How about if I were to say, when I come to Upland, I always eat lunch? Is that something that's going to happen in the future, or is it a general statement about something that always happens? It's something that always happens. Cuando yo voy a Upland, siempre almuerzo. Now there's one term that is different. Aunque, como, and adonde are adverbial phrases that may take the indicative or the subjunctive. They don't necessarily deal with time. And the more common of all of these is aunque. Aunque can be translated even though, for something that normally happens, or even if, pointing to something in the future that's unknown. The indicative is used when referring to something that is definite. Quiero viajar aunque es caro. I want to travel even though it's expensive. It's definite, and I know it to be true. The subjunctive is used when referring to something that isn't known or something that is unknown. For example, quiero viajar aunque sea caro. I want to travel even if it's expensive. And I don't know if it's expensive or not. It's unknown to me. And I'm letting you know that by using the subjunctive. Determina si el verbo mejor completa la oración en el indicativo o en el subjuntivo. Determine which verb better, best, or best completes the sentence, the indicative or the subjunctive. Number 1. Siempre cuando vamos o vayamos a viajar, yo traigo mi pasaporte. The answer is vamos. Siempre cuando vamos a viajar, yo traigo mi pasaporte. Can you see the reasons for that? You have siempre, which means that it always happens. Always, when we travel, I bring my passport. Something that always happens, and so therefore it's indicative. That's following cuando. Hablamos de la situación de los refugiados cuando haya más tiempo. Hablamos de la situación de los refugiados cuando haya más tiempo. We talk about the situation of the refugees when there is more time. In other words, there's none now, and it's kind of speculative as to when it will be. It's unknown, so you're going to use subjunctive. Number 3. No vamos a dejar de luchar hasta que todos tengan sus derechos. No vamos a dejar. We're not going to stop to fight until everyone has their rights. There's our future. We are not going to stop. Talking about sometime in the future, so the subjunctive is going to be used. Number 4. Continuaremos hasta eliminar la pobreza. Because there's no change of subject, we will continue until we eliminate all poverty. And you don't conjugate the second verb because it is following the preposition. And you don't use hasta que because there's no change of subject. Number 5. Fuimos a Centroamérica a fin de que la gente allá tuviera los recursos necesarios. It has to be past subjunctive because fuimos is in the past. And a fin de que is a adverbial clause that always takes subjunctive following it. Con un compañero, escojan una de las fotos y expliquen las circunstancias, mencionando quiénes son las personas y qué hacen. Usen algunas de las expresiones adverbiales y decidan si se requiere el indicativo o el subyuntivo. So with a friend, choose some of the pictures and explain the circumstances, mentioning who the people are and what they're doing. Use some of the adverbial expressions and decide if they require the indicative or the subjunctive. And these are the clauses. You can pause this and use some of these expressions here we'll go over in class.